Praise the Lord. I hope you're having a blessed day today. Let's get into a devotion for today. And today I want to do something a little different here. I have been considering this for a few days and I've been thinking about it and praying about it a lot. And I just wanted to bring you a devotion concerning the things going on in the world today, especially what's going on over in Russia, Ukraine, over in Europe. And as I consider these things today, the fighting still goes on. I'm recording this on Thursday morning here on the 3rd, March the 3rd, on Thursday morning. And as I record this, they're, I think, in the 8th day of fighting now, something like that, the 7th or the 8th day. And you see the pictures like I do on television. All you have to do is get on there. About every news network is running around the clock coverage somehow of this, from some angle of this. Whether from our angle, their angle, somebody's angle. And we see all of these things happening, and of course people ask questions, what is going to be the end result, what's going to happen, and our attention spans is very short in America especially. We don't stay focused on anything very, very long. We just move from one story to the next story to the next. But this has gained our attention, and because of the tragic nature of it, this war, it's been a long time since we've seen something quite in this nature happen right there in Europe. And so this is an ongoing thing, and there's real fighting going on. I mean, it's real, actual fighting. There's not talking about fighting or something like that, but fighting, casualties. And there's so many women, children, men have died. Humanitarian crisis that is ensuing and coming very quickly and getting worse even as we speak. And all of these things are adding up more and more to, we see just a terrible crisis unfolding before our very eyes. Now, saying all of that, people have asked what could happen there. What could happen, what could take place there. Well, let me just throw a few scenarios out there. What could happen in Ukraine. Well, this could be a long drawn out thing. It could be something that lasts, for a month, 2 months, 3 months. People thought that Russia would go right in there and just run right over the top of them, and that's not happened. And Russia still has, nuclear weapons and so forth, and they've not used any of those, and I hope they don't use any of those. I hope nobody in the world would use those. But Russia definitely has the upper hand as far as weapons are concerned. It may take a month to take over the country. I don't know, or get it to the point where the Ukrainian people finally surrender. And, it might be at that point that Russia will install a puppet government. They'll come in, they'll install their little government in place there. They'll try to act like they're going to let Ukrainians run their government. They're not. That's not what's going to happen. Vladimir Putin will run the country from Russia, so to speak. The rest of the world could jump in. That could happen. The rest of the world could jump in other than just sending weapons and aid. The rest of the world could jump in through NATO and just say, hey, that's enough. You go back to where you're supposed to be and jump into the fight. That could happen. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's a possibility. So that could happen. And if that happened, it would change everything completely. The fighting would be escalated to a much greater extent. And yes, Europe could push Russia back into Russia. They could push them easily out of Ukraine, but it could get very bloody very quickly, and a lot of people could die because Russia could use some of their larger arsenal, the bombs and so forth, in a battle such as that, and it would get very bloody very quickly. But yes, they could be pushed back into Russia very easily. The humanitarian crisis will just only get worse and worse as we see these things happening. Whatever happens, that's going to get worse. The people are just not going to have the food. The farmers that normally plant in the spring because of the war and everything that's going on, and they're just not going to be able to plant their normal crops. Some crops I'm sure will be planted, but it's not going to be like normal. It's a very large country. It's about the size of Texas. And they're they used to be considered the breadbasket of Russia through there. I mean, Ukraine grows a lot of grains and so forth, and so in that regard, they're going to be hurting when it comes to trying to feed their own people, where they normally have all this produce coming in and all these grains coming in. That won't happen because of the war. And even if the war stopped right now, it would be very hard for everybody to get back on schedule because so many people have left the country. About 1 million people or more have fled the country, and they would have to, come back in, and what's been torn up because so much stuff has been blown apart would have to be repaired. So either way, we're looking here at a situation where there's going to be, definitely a lot of aid that's going to have to come in from the outside because there's just been so much devastation already done. And the longer each day that goes on, each week that goes on, more and more devastation, more things happening, more infrastructure is destroyed. And this is all going to amount to a much greater humanitarian crisis. And then there's, one thing I wrote down and just put in there, Putin's people, Vladimir Putin's people in Russia there could try to topple him and overthrow him because the sanctions that are going to come upon Russia are very severe and going to be worse and worse as time goes by. In the short term, you can sustain it a little bit more because you can kind of eat up your stockpile, what you have stockpiled up. But sooner or later, that's going to subside, and when it does, there are other countries that Russia can get aid from. China will be very friendly to them. Some other countries, Iran and different countries will be very friendly to them, and they'll help. They'll help with aid and stuff such as this. But still, Russia does depend on a lot of Europe and a lot of the other parts of the world for things as well, and also to sell their items so they can have income coming in. So saying all of that, the Russian people may say, hey, we've put up with this long enough. It would have to take one of the generals that's under Putin right now. It would take one of the generals that would have a contingency of the armed forces behind him. They would have to rise up and take over because Putin controls all the military, and whoever controls the guns is going to control the country. And so it would take somebody in that nature to rise up. There's not going to be an overswell of people just on the streets or something like that. I don't see that because the Russian people are so ruthless that they will just go out and arrest them, imprison them, or just kill them. And they will shut down the riots. So it won't be like in America where people go and they burn buildings and they burn police cars and they burn government buildings and things like that. That's not going to happen. I don't see that happening at all. Yeah, people may get out in the streets and riot. They may get out, but it'll be short-lived just for the fact they'll shut it down and they'll use such a stern hand. They may even declare martial law here in the next day or two, and if they do that, they'll just shut everything down, and there won't be any people at all, basically hardly nothing in the streets, so to speak. So all of these things are possibilities of what could go on in Ukraine. You say, well, what do you think biblically, Pastor Steve, is going to go on there? Does this have anything to do with Jesus coming back again and so forth? You have to understand that these wars are nothing like what has gone on in the past as far as in Europe, because Europe had the First and Second World War, which was just horrible, horrible wars. So this is nothing to that magnitude. But I will say this. Jesus said in Luke chapter 20, let me get my bearings straight here. Luke chapter 21 and verse number 25. He said, there will be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, and the sea and the waves roaring. So he said there will be distress of nations, and that's what we're seeing, distress of nations. It's perplexity. It means when people stand in doubt or feel like there's no hope or no way out. And we're seeing those things as well in that parts of the world as well. And so this has gotten a little long, so I'm going to have to conclude it, and I'll have to do another one, and I'll try to get another one here done so we can do a follow-up to this. But I want to tell you this. As Christians, as believers, we need to understand that we're living in the day of the return of Christ. Of course, we know this. We're also living in the day that God calls us to be a good Samaritan and to help those that are in need. Whether it's the man right beside us or the man, overseas, so to speak, we're to do what we can to help others. And so we're called to be good Samaritans no matter who it is that's fallen on hard times. And so we help and we try to bless, and we certainly pray a whole lot for the people there. The Church of God has about 100 churches in Ukraine, and I'm sure that many of these churches are in harm's way. We have about 7 churches in Kiev there. We had 2 orphanages that had to be evacuated in this nation. So there's a lot of things going on, and that's just the Church of God. There's just so many other ministries there that are in distress as well. So we're all going to pray together and ask God to help us and to help the people there, because those people need the Lord. I'm telling you, they need the Lord right now, and they need our help. And so we'll just do that. We'll pray, we'll help, we'll do what we can. And I'll bring in another devotion about this, because I believe there's so much here to talk about, and it's hard to talk about it all at one time. God bless you. Hope you have a great day. Hope this helped a little bit, and we'll get into another one.